Razor Gore the Untamed. Start the fight off with your entire group by the Orb of Domination. Kill the initial enemies by the orb, then have your tank click the orb to take control of Razor Gore. This individual who has control of Razor Gore needs to destroy as many eggs as possible by running up to them and using the Destroy Egg ability. While their Destroy Egg ability is on cooldown, they can CC some of the ads with the Calm Dragonkin and do damage with Fireball Volley. After 90 seconds, they will stop controlling Razor Gore and get a debuff not allowing them to control him again for 1 minute, so your other tank should click the orb to control and just continue the process of destroying eggs. While all of this is going on, an onslaught of enemies will be pouring into the room and your group just needs to kill them all. Blackwing Mages first. Once Razor Gore destroys all the eggs, he won't be controlled anymore, so your tank needs to pick him up. The tank will be hit by Conflagration, which will disorient them and they'll lose threat. Razor Gore is immune to taunts, so your other tank should make sure they have threat built up. Full DPS on Razor Gore to take him out. Valestraza. Your entire raid should be stacked to the side of the boss while the tanks point her towards the throne since she has a frontal breath and a tail sweep. A random mana user will get burning adrenaline and should move out of the raid with it. They'll get increased DPS but will lose 5% health a second, and once they die they deal around 5k damage to everyone around them. Otherwise tank and spake to take out Valestraza. Broodlord Lash Slayer. Tank should position the boss in the corner of the last alcove with their backs to the wall, and range and heals can stand by the exit gate. Broodlord will do knock away on his current tank, knocking them back, but their back is against the wall, so it's useless. Broodlord will also do blast wave on the melee. It will knock them back, so just be aware of that. Flamemaul. Tank Flamemaul by the doorway where Broodlord was. Flame Buffet will frequently go out on the raid. Once you get to 5 to 10 stacks, depending on your fire resistance, LOS yourself around the corner from Flamemaul so your debuff falls off. Tank should have the Onyxia Scale Cloak and wear it for this boss because of Shadow Flame. It's a frontal cone that does deadly damage if you aren't wearing the cloak. Flamemaul also does Wing Buffet, which is another frontal cone and reduces the threat of any target hit by it, so Tank should be aware of that. Ebonrock. This dragon also has Wing Buffet and Shadow Flame, which work the same as on Flamemaul. Both frontal cones, and tanks should make sure they have the Onyxia Scale Cloak. The only other thing Ebonrock has is Shadow of Ebonrock. This will be applied to the main tank, and as soon as it does, an off tank should taunt it, or else the dragon will heal from meleeing the shadow target. Gore. This dragon has Wing Buffet and Shadow Flame like the previous two dragons. Both frontal cones, and tank should make sure, yeah, you get the idea. The only other ability the Gore has is a Frenzy, so hunters should take turns using Trank Shot to remove it. Chromagus. The dog should be tanked by the doorway so the raid can use this corner to LOS. Chromagus will cast 2 out of 5 possible breaths. The breaths he casts are on a weekly rotation. Your raid needs to LOS around the corner prior to a breath going out to not take damage from it. The hardest breath you need to worry about is Time Lapse. This will have to generate a threat of the main tank, so be aware of that. Other than the breaths, Chromagus will radiate Brood Affliction, which cannot be line of sighted. There are 5 different afflictions. The black one is a curse, the blue one is a magic, the green one is a poison, and the red one is a disease, and the bronze one can only be dispelled by using Hourglass Sand. These need to be dispelled by any class who is able to, including mages and warlocks, because if a raid member gets affected by all 5, they'll turn into a dragonkin and will probably wipe the raid. Lastly, Chromagus has a frenzy ability that your hunter should take turns dispelling. Nefarian. Prior to the fight, everyone in the raid should have an Onyxia Scale Cloak, or they will die. Phase 1, have half your raid in front of one door where the ads spawn and the other half of your raid in front of the other. Kill all the ads for this phase to end. Phase 2 begins and Nefarian will cast Shadow Flame on the entire group. If you aren't wearing your cloak, you will die. Nefarian does have a frontal cone, so tanks make sure to establish aggro and point him away from the raid, with your raid to his side. Nefarian casts Bellowing Roar every 30 seconds, which will fear anyone within 35 yards. Berserking Rage, Fear Ward, and Tremor Totems are handy. Otherwise, ranged healers try to outrange it. He'll also cast Veil of Shadow on the closest raid member to the center of his hitbox. And if it's a tank, then it should be dispelled by a druid or mage. Otherwise, just ignore it. Ads from phase 1 will be resurrected, so an off tank should pick them up to be cleaved down. Other than that, every 30 seconds Nefarian will do class calls on random raid members, which is different depending on your class. If you're a druid, you're forced into cat form. Mages will randomly cast polymorph on random raid members. Paladins will periodically affect Nefarian with Blessing of Protection. Priests will hurt raid members through their heals, so stop healing. Rogues are teleported and immobilized somewhere near Nefarian. Shamans will summon totems that will buff Nefarian. Warlocks will summon infernals that will stun players. Warriors are forced into berserker stance and take increased damage, and hunters will have their ranged weapon immediately broken. Yikes.